The state of K through 12 education in Michigan is one of the big topics here at the Mackinac Policy Conference. How to improve the way our kids learn, the policies that surround that, and the funding to make it all happen are all part of a very complex problem. And joining me now for a bigger discussion on looking for answers on education reform is Doug Rothwell. He's the CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. Doug, it's always good to see you.
Okay. Thanks, Christy.
Also joining us is Amber Arellano, and she's the Executive Director of Education Trust Midwest. Welcome back, Amber. It's good to see you as well.
Thank you.
And Thomas Haas, he is the President of Grand Valley State University. Tom, it's good to see you as well.
Thank you for having me here.
We met last year when we did actually a main stage production there in the theater talking about the governor's 21st Century Commission on Education and the entire report that came out of that.
Right.
So I'm going to ask all of you and kind of start off with you, Tom, at the bottom. Do you think we have changed the conversation about what needs to happen for K through 12 education in Michigan?
I think it's gotten started. We have a long way to go yet, but our folks in the business community understand how important talent is. And the K through 12, part of the continuum, where the report is a great framework to help us frame some of the way forward. Now it's up to us here in the state of Michigan for action. So I think right now the governor, with part of his Marshall Plan and some of the other activity that I've been seeing in West Michigan and here in the rest of the state, we now have to take the framework and prioritize and get some action going.
Amber, how do you perceive the conversation has been changing?
Well, I think you look back just 2 or 3 years ago and how many organizations sort of sat K-12 off to the side and didn't participate on it, didn't lead on it, just weren't engaged in the topic. And I think that is a really big change that we're seeing. And credit Business Leaders for Michigan for coming out with its first K-12 education report just this spring. The Detroit Regional Chamber has been really important partners. They're doing more and more, not only in Detroit, but in the region. Grand Rapids Regional Chamber, also really important organization, increasingly leading and K-12. So I think the good news is that leadership it's much more engaged, and I think really increasingly committed to turning around the crisis that we have.
Doug, what are you hearing now?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that what we have to keep in mind is it's not as though we haven't been working on K-12 improvements over these last few years. I mean, we've had some wins. I think what we haven't had is kind of a more holistic strategy where everybody was kind of working towards the same goals. And I think that's what we're all most encouraged by, is it seems like people are realizing that, okay, we've been trying these individual initiatives and look where we are. We can do better than this. Maybe we do better if we work together.
So what is the next, step of action? We talk about having the reports and studying and seeing where we need to go. So where is that first step? Who does it come from, and where does the leadership come from? Doug, let me start with you. Yeah,
well, it really is making sure that we have identified everybody that needs to be at the table to be able to work on what we call education reform and improvement. And I think that we've made great progress over the last few months doing that. I hope that in the next few weeks we're able to talk more specifically about what that looks like, because there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes right now. And once that happens, then I hope there'll also be an announcement about, here's a couple of issues that we can all agree to work on. But it's right now, I'd say it's at a point where we're just trying to build trust and support for recognizing that we really do want to see these improvements working together.
Amber, go ahead, and what would you say in agreement with that, or to add on to that?
I think the fact that the business community is really leaning in on this, we're seeing it here at the conference with all of the conversation going on. I think we're going to see more of that in the coming months. And I think what will be important is to make sure that that's an inclusive conversation, and that communities of color, civil rights organizations, community leaders, that there are many organizations and leaders that are involved in participating in that conversation.
Tom, when you talk about reform, there's so many different pieces to it. Is there also part of it that you need to step back and see, what is our next bit of leadership in Michigan going to be? Who's going to be in the governor's office? What's going to be happening in the legislature? Do you have to wait for those pieces of the puzzle as well?
No, we can't wait. We've been waiting too long, and we have to take that action. And I would take this answer to your question in two ways. I think we got to get started early childhood, third grade. Get there. It's supply chain at its best, and then you take a look at that supply chain through K through 12, through community colleges, through careers, through trades, and through universities. So get started now and get that early childhood, K through 12, all figured out now. We can't wait on that. Now the rest of the framework can be used by leaders who are going to be in the governor's office and those that are coming to the Senate and the House. One of the things that I've noted time and again is that education's a public good. Education, if you look at it as a public good, started in the Northwest Ordinances in 1787. It was in the 63 Constitution. And for the last 30 years, we've gone away from that. So it really now becomes a focus, I think, of good leadership to understand that the public good, it is a public education that is going to drive our state forward.
Hey, Doug, have we stopped thinking about education in that way? That do we need to go back and saying it is public good, but not only is it public good, it is also an economic driver. It makes smart economic sense to make sure that we have this system in place.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tom and I have worked on the idea of making sure that higher education is a higher priority in Michigan for, how many years now. And, it's unfortunate that this is one of the areas that we've disinvested in more than just about any other place. And so I don't know if people don't think it's a public good, but it's certainly not gotten the priority level that we think it should in terms of funding. But I want to go back to one other thing that maybe Tom said for a minute, Christy, which is I hope that the elected leaders that are running or people that are running for elected office right now really do look to reports that Tom put out, that Amber puts out, we've put out, before they come up with their own plans. I mean, one thing we don't need right now is yet another set of ideas that we have to kind of redo. I think there's a lot of good work that's already been done and will be done. What we need is support to get those over the finish line.
And it's really making it a priority. Amber, we've talked a little bit in the past about looking at other states that are doing things that we can emulate. So do we feel that we finally have a framework from places like Massachusetts and some ideas from Tennessee that we can incorporate and that can actually work here in Michigan, seeing as those are two very different states from what we're dealing with here?
They are different states, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that the way forward for Michigan won't look exactly like it has in, say, Massachusetts. That said, there are sort of like common strategies and investments that really all of the fastest improving and leading states have done. For example, really investing on improving teaching quality, building the capacity of local educators and school principals to raise learning levels. Those are the kinds of things that I think many, many people acknowledge and understand. As a parent, I'm sure you know, right, the quality of the teacher in front of your child every day in the school makes a huge difference in their life. And so I think there's a growing appreciation for educators in the field and what we need to do to better support them. And the question is, what does that look like? And I think we're going to figure that out in the next several months.
That brings in a couple of issues to play. And Tom, let me ask you, as a university president, how many people are you seeing going in the teaching profession and looking at educating our teachers? Is this a growing field, or are we a little stagnant right now in Michigan?
Yeah, one of the focus that we had with the commission report was looking at the teacher profession. Developing new teachers in the right way to really meet the challenges of the students that are coming through our system now and to the future. Retooling those teachers that we already have, making sure that the teaching profession is celebrated, not denigrated. And over these past years, I've seen that dynamic where the teaching profession is not held up high. And we're seeing at Grand Valley, for instance, in the last 10 years, we've seen a reduction of almost 50% of teachers wanting not to come into the profession. And it's really unfortunate because we're about to hit a very important point, because the number of retirees in the teaching profession is going to just really zoom up. We're going to really face a crisis just in the teaching profession, and having the right teachers with the credentials in front of our young people.
Doug, give me a wide view when you take a look at Michigan and when other states look at Michigan and other businesses look at Michigan and maybe we should relocate here. Take a look at Amazon, take a look at Foxconn, take a look at anybody else who might have been sizing up. How do we look to the rest of the country in terms of what our education system is here and the fits and starts that we've had in even trying to make the fixes that are necessary?
Well, the bottom line is not very good. I mean, our education attainment level overall in Michigan is below average. If you look at 4th and 8th grade reading and math scores, they're below average. If you look at the percentage of our kids that are deemed to be college or career ready in the 11th grade, we're below average. And for companies these days, whether you're in manufacturing or high tech or just a headquarters even, you need highly educated and skilled talent. And we're also a state that's not growing in population. And so you put all that together in your Amazon, you say, if I got to hire 50,000 people, where are they going to come from? So I think it creates a burning platform for us in Michigan to say, look, We have got to get this right. We've got to make it a higher priority. And as Tom said and Amber have said earlier, it starts all the way from pre-K all the way through college education. And I appreciate the need for us to focus on the immediacy of filling workforce development jobs, technical trade jobs right now, but it's a much bigger issue than that.
Yeah, you don't want to start getting in, well, we're just going to concentrate here, or
Right.
we're just going to focus over here. Amber, as a parent, when you sit here and you say things need to be done, how patient should parents be in Michigan? We talked about how, well, we need the business community to get behind these efforts, and we need politicians to get behind these efforts. How important is it in terms of parents and saying this needs to happen and putting pressure on lawmakers to say this needs to be your number one priority?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. And I think for so many parents, we may know that there may be a problem. Maybe things aren't quite what they should be, even if you don't know what the national assessment data looks like, for example. But there's not always obvious ways to get involved. And so one of the things that we've been doing as an organization is trying to provide those kinds of opportunities for parents and educators. And for those who are interested, they can go to www.michiganachieves.org. We've had more than 70,000 Michigan parents and educators sign up for not only to get more information, but to sign up to be able to get more involved. And not just what's going on in their school, but what's going on at the state level and what our state leaders are doing, the decisions that they're making. Because so much what happens in public education isn't decided in the classroom. It's decided at the state level. So it's important for parents to have a voice in that.
Tom?
I think it's a moral opportunity for us. It's a moral imperative, really, because I've said this in an editorial that I wrote a few weeks ago for the Detroit News, that are we abusing our children by not investing in them for their future? I think we are. So it's a moral opportunity and obligation that we have to the future. We have to make this a huge priority. We talk about the roads of Michigan with the potholes. Think about the lack of investment in talent and in young people in K through 12. They're going to leave individuals with huge holes for their opportunities well into the future.
So, Doug, people hear investment, they automatically think money, and they automatically think, I'm going to have to pay more money, and I maybe don't want to do that. How do you make the argument or talk about that maybe some increase of funding or different kinds of ways of the way we fund things, that's how it's going to have to be,
Right.
that it's going to have to take some dollars somewhere along the line?
Well, I mean, I don't think we'd be doing the right thing if we just put more money into the system we have today when the system's producing what it is. So I think it's incumbent upon us, all of us sitting here together, to say, how can we look at spending what we have more effectively and more efficiently on things that we know in research shows best practices? How do we then, be able to look at our system and say, do we really need it the way it was designed 100 years ago today? Is there a better way of doing it before we even get to the question of saying, do we need to raise taxes to get more money for the system? I think there's a lot we can do before we cross that bridge.
All right, and I look forward to having many more conversations with all of you about this in the coming year, and we'll see what happens next. Doug Rothwell, Amber Arellano, Tom Haas, thanks so much for joining me.